So this evening, our task is to go through the Charter Review Commission final report. It's at this point still a draft. It is a document that is the product of our work since we began in November. And I want to thank Commissioner Montes de Oca for her leadership in helping to guide us in the formation of the document, and my thanks to the others who worked with her in that process. So we're going to go step by step through the document, and commissioners can ask questions as our co-chair guides us through this document, and then at her leadership, we will either approve section by section, or we will approve the document when she finishes reviewing. Again, this is a draft document, and every commissioner has the right to express concerns or approval or to make amendments to this document. We do hope that we will have a high regard for the work of those commissioners who have labored to put this report together, and that we will also be mindful of the time. So with that, Commissioner Julianne Montes de Oca, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And oops, I always hit the start-stop button on the video too many times. I can't take any credit really for this draft. I didn't draft it. I've been an editor with Ernest. Him and I have edited a lot. Ernest, Andy, and Emily have all been the main drafters. Oh, and Terrell as well drafted a section. So the introduction does get to the point that several people made in the last meeting of the limited time we had to review the charter. And it also looks at a focus on the health of democracy in Baltimore City. And Andy just put up that Davon was also helping with the drafting. And if I said the wrong name earlier, apologies. From just the general introduction, we move to the council size. And let's see, sorry, I'm looking at the draft on my phone, which is not ideal for squinting. Ernest, sorry, go ahead. I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. So I wrote the first draft of the introduction. And I think if I am understanding what Commissioner Harris is saying, I think that the introduction is really not an executive summary, and I do agree that it would be a good idea to have one, maybe as part of the cover letter. I would say that the introduction does not serve that purpose. I think it's pretty easy to, once we agree on a draft, it's actually pretty easy to write up an executive summary, even if it is as simple as just, here is the report, and here are the recommendations. Each has a bullet point, one sentence. We do not need to go into more detail than that.
Thank you, Ernest. Okay. All right, the first recommendation is on the council size. And each of the sections starts with background and then moves to the recommendation of the commission. And the recommendation here is to propose 12 council districts instead of 14. And as pointed out in the last meeting, this is a direct attempt to push the council to nullify the Sinclair Broadcasting proposal that's already on the ballot. Andy, am I missing something important that should be added here? You're on mute.
I don't think so. I think your summary and the section that Davon wrote, I think covered that pretty well.
Yeah. Anybody else have any questions on that section? All right, then the next section is on referendum. And this is a section that does have quite a bit of background information. This is Appendix A, right, Andy?
Yeah, it has. I mean, this one also has an appendix with it. I think it's Appendix B, but.
Oh, okay. That's right. The other one was Appendix A. All right. So again, starts with the background information on the other charter counties that have the power of referendum, scope, the amount of signatures required, the time. Andy addressed how there would be other changes necessary to implement this. For example, the timing in which bills go into force. And then the recommendation of the commission is to give Baltimore City voters the power of referendum. And Ernest, as I go through each of these like this, I see your point about the executive summary being 1 or 2 bullets. All right, any questions on the referendum section? And apologies for the toddler who really wants more Oreos.
I mean
right.
that they get more Oreos.
He says you're now his favorite person. If he talked, he would say that. All right. Third up is Commissioner Willis.
Oh, yes. In concept, there's no problem with referendum, but I'm not as familiar as Andy and some of you with what the subject matters that would be subject to referendum. I'm concerned about slowing down progress in the city by creating too many burdens. If there are groups that just simply want to slow things down. And so I'm concerned about, I appreciate the tables. I love the tables and it's good work, but I would have appreciated a definition of what is expedited legislation and what's the requirement for that. I assume that's somewhere already. And then what other types of issues that have been petitioned to referendum. I would appreciate a little more consideration about that. So I'm a little uncertain at this point on the blanket recommendation, although the concept is fine. It's the details that I have some concerns about.
So can I answer that?
Yes, please.
So I think that the recommendation is the council needs to figure those things out. It's not our job to figure out which things are in scope of it. And
I'm confused about that. I mean, I think if we have a recommendation, we should make it, and rather than just saying the way you said that, kind of like you said, it's up to you, council. We just agree with the concept, and that's fine if that's all we want to say. But
right. So, I mean, the recommendation that we agreed on at the last meeting, I believe.
Now, when you say we, I voted against it, so it's not we. All right.
The recommendation that the body voted in favor of at the last meeting is, I believe, what we have in here, which is that where is it? The charter be amended to give Baltimore voters the power of referendum, and the council will need to decide what is in scope of the referendum, the amount of petitions, and the time by which a petition must be filed. So, I mean, I don't think that we have figured out exactly what things get to be covered. And if we had met for the 13 months that we're allowed to meet for by the charter, we may have been able to resolve some of those things, which is why I think that the introduction that Ernest wrote and the piece that Josh was talking about going in the front there is useful to explain why we didn't get a chance to get into this detail, because we were 3 years late and 6 months short in the amount of time we had to deliberate. So at the end of the day, I think that this captures the recommendation that the body agreed to last time, which is that the council do this and to take into account these 3 things.
Okay, so let me jump in here and say that I think it is important for us to give the city council specific direction. And I think that it is possible that we can offer language that does that to a certain degree. So, Commissioner Willis, I heard you say that your opposition is based on the fact that this is too vague. If that is the case, then would you like to offer a scope? If you would not like,
I liked Andy's articulation of what his intent was here in his framing here this evening, which was, I think we should be upfront about the limitations we had in conducting all the exhaustive research that would have been needed to come up with what is expedited legislation, what is budget, that's a big task. And to say to the council, the concept of referendum we support, and Andy, you had some other language that I thought was more neutral that would make sure that it was we recommending that they initiate a study and that they determine appropriate standards. And I could go along with something like that, but I don't want somebody reading this document 20 years from now and saying, we agreed to X, Y, Z. We didn't. We just agreed with the concept of referendum.
okay. Are there other commissioners who have input on this matter?
Kind of what you said, and that can all go in the beginning summary, I suppose.
So two questions I would ask is the text that I thought that the text that I wrote in this section was trying to represent what the decision was of the body at the last meeting. Are you comfortable with that text in the first two sentences of the recommendation block? I can't.
Professor Willis, you're on mute.
My arms too much and things get hit. I think what threw me off was you cite at the bottom the Montgomery County Charter example, and I don't know that that's necessary. The paragraphs above, I think, are fine. In other words, we're throwing it to them to decide scope, petition, time, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with you that we can get rid of that block about Montgomery County. I think in a standalone research.
You've got the Montgomery County citation and everything in the chart.
I think in this report, we can eliminate that citation from Montgomery County. And I do think that clarifies. Are you good with it if we remove that?
Yeah, remove that. I just think it's confusing in my quick reading. It was confusing. And if we're simply saying we suggest referendum, which is a good government thing to do, but council, you need to decide scope, petition requirements, and timing. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that makes. I'm good with that. If the other drafters are good with that, I don't know that we need to take a vote on that edit, but I'm certainly good on it. I see Ernest as a hand up. Sorry.
Well, I just want to make sure that there are no other commissioners who want to weigh in on this.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question, if I could. We're talking about taking the paragraph out at the bottom of page 3 that uses the, for example, the Montgomery County Charter. That's the one that's the section that we're talking about losing. I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right page.
Yes. That's what.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone who objects to an editorial adjustment here rather than a vote?
Ernest, was your hand up in relation to that or something different?
Oops. Something different.
All right. Andy, are you done, or you want to wrap up that point?
I'm good. No, I agree with this suggestion, and I'm good with making that edit.
Back to you, Julianne.
Ernest, was your comment on this section?
Yes, it is. Did I understand that there is also a Did I understand that we're also talking about adding in some kind of language that explicitly says this commission is not going to define things like scope of referendum, how many signatures are needed, et cetera, because we did not have the time to do that. I wasn't sure if that was on offer.
My idea was to put that in a beginning summary or something, not to necessarily add it to this document.
I see.
Because I think that's a frustration we've all had the last 6 months. So,
Okay, so moving on to the next section is the Department of Legislative Reference. And this section is quite brief because the recommendation really boils down to that sentence that's in bold to encourage I guess encourage isn't the right word that we used here, to recommend that the council move forward with a charter amendment to prune and clarify the role and mission of the Department of Legislative Reference and focus its mission as a professional, independent organization that drafts, publishes, and archives all law, regulation, and policy for the Baltimore City government. That bolded language is the language that was voted on in the last meeting and approved as a recommendation to the council. Any comments on that brief section, or Andy, did I miss anything?
No.
Okay. All right. The next section is on party representation on the Charter Commission. And I guess the one sentence summary of this one would be that the commission recommends that this Charter Commission charter be amended to include a provision that each political party recognized by the State Board of Elections at the time the commission is established may appoint one member to the commission.
And I'll also say that I did add a sentence before that to address Professor Willis's concern about unaffiliated voters, which is not in the recommendation we voted on, but it does say, while not included in this motion that passed, there was also members of the commission who felt unaffiliated voters should receive consideration for dedicated and reserved positions. Does that effectively capture your position?
no, I don't like this amendment. I don't like this suggestion at all. And I'm going to, at the minimum, have to write a minority report on this. I mean, right now in Maryland, in Baltimore City, we're in a different state, and I'm not sure letting the state party designate parties satisfies our need for representation. You know, I'd be more interested in geographic, demographic standards, whatever that could ensure representation. I mean, we have 75% registered Dems, over 75. We're over 15% unaffiliated. We're only 7.2% Republican. The Libertarians have 0.003, so we're into the 0.3%. They only have 1,192 members. And the No Labels Party, which is currently only has 26 members in the city, you're virtually appointing every single No Labels person to every position. And to me, that's unrealistic, unworkable, impracticable, and it's the wrong standard.
So we had the political discussion about this last time, but as a factual basis, one no labels person would be able to be on the charter commission. That's one point about it.
Yeah,
There's
but
no other
1 out
access.
of 26 is
Sure,
now
sure.
400,000 registered voters. That could be taking the place of a larger segment of the population.
Sure. And sure, it is. I mean, the second thing I will say is No Labels just got on the ballot and just got on the ballot in February of this year. So they have had 3 months for people to go to the DMV and register and change their affiliation there. And so we will see how many they have in a year and 2 years and things like that. But I don't think that 26 is a terribly realistic reflection of the size of the impact they will have as more people are able to register.
Well, I think you're wrong on all of your assumptions you made.
I know you do.
And if I could cut in here,
hold on, I just want to say,
a lot of places have a threshold that an organized political party has to meet in order to assure itself of representation. And I just think there's a better way to try to reach at the issue
I got you.
trying to get to, which is making sure that bodies reflect the city.
I got you. And I know we had the political discussion about it last time. You disagreed. It passed. I was just pointing out 2 points of factual clarification.
No, that's fine. I'm sure we could entertain somebody with our continual debate, but I just think it's impractical and doesn't make sense.
So, Andy, giving all due consideration to your well-reasoned rationale, do you have a response to the very valid point that John makes about kind of overrepresentation and misrepresentation, and how that could really skew a conversation?
Yeah.
So that our commissions are not representative of the people of the city. I mean,
sure. So I'll say this only applies to the Charter Commission. It does not apply to the rest of the commissions. So it is adding onto a 23-person commission a few more spots. And how many?
Let's be specific. Right now, how many would that be?
When this commission was chartered, it would have been Democrats, Libertarians, and Republicans would have gotten to add 1 person to the commission because Greens didn't have ballot access at the time and No Labels didn't have ballot access at the time. So when this commission was convened in November, each of those 3 parties would have been able to appoint a person. That's probably pretty close to proportional for Republicans. Probably a reasonable allocation, 1 out of 26 for Republicans, right? Democrats would be underrepresented, and maybe the party wants to have somebody, the Central Committee does in fact want to be able to appoint somebody. Libertarians would be overrepresented, and I think there's value in overrepresenting minor parties because it encourages more people to be affiliated with those parties. I will say party registration and affiliation for small parties is an illusory number in some ways when it doesn't get you any material benefits in Maryland. So if you're registered as a Democrat or a Republican, you can vote in a party primary of those parties. But if you're registered as a Green, a Libertarian, No Labels, or some other party, you don't actually get to vote in a primary. You don't get anything. The state grants you nothing as a result of that. So comparing registration numbers when the state has no way of making that meaningful means those numbers are going to be down. Now, it doesn't mean that there's really 4, 5, 6% of those folks, but it does mean that registration isn't necessarily the best metric for determining that, because it is literally the most, and I'll add another point here. If I am unaffiliated and the Democrats open their primary, I can participate in it. If I'm registered Green and the Democrats open their primary, I cannot participate in it. So having party affiliation is the least material way of measuring support for small parties possible. I would say instead, look at vote totals in elections. And I think if you look at vote totals in elections, if you're looking for a number, you're going to see that the Greens and Libertarians and probably no Liberals, when they have a candidate, vastly outperform the number of registered voters that they have. And so, like Professor Willis said, we can have a long conversation about the value of party representation, but I do think it's worth considering that the numbers that are used for registration and affiliation aren't the best tool to consider. And, I don't know. I mean,
you're getting somewhere, Andy, because I'm suggesting that representation ought to be on other factors. What about seniors? What about students? What about disability community? What about other communities that may get traditionally left off of these things? I think the problem is because there's the word party in here. You're thinking, how do I make that egalitarian? But I really think the issue is broader than that in terms of revising a charter, getting on a charter.
No, I think both you guys make great points on this issue.
Yeah.
I think perhaps in our background, we ought to raise more specifically, or even in our cover letter as well, or in the introduction, the points that Commissioner Willis is raising. As you all may recall, I had considerable concern when this commission was first convened that there was no Latino representation on this commission, and Latinos make a considerable portion of our population. Also concerned about the black-white balance on the commission, and I think the other indicators that Commissioner Willis raised are also valid points. Geographic age, perhaps some income indicator. It is as Commissioner Lee has been saying, and others, we've had limited time to do this work, so we couldn't do all the things. So I'm wondering if, because I kind of feel like the two of you commissioners are talking apples and oranges. And I don't know that Andy's point is at the exclusion of your point, Commissioner Willis, as much as we didn't have the time or use the time to thoroughly flesh out a solution to the very valid issues that you're raising. So that's kind of my take on this conversation. The other point that I would okay, well, that's on Julianne to call on him. I'm just giving or for him to jump in. I'm just offering my perspective here, and my perspective, or the final question that I have is, Andy, do you feel like our recommendation is worded properly, such that those who would interpret it and implement it wouldn't think that those 3 to 5 seats would take away from other seats, but would be in addition to the existing seats on the.
So I want to let Ben speak, and then I will answer that question and offer some things that I think can maybe solve this at this late hour, if that's okay.
I will be interested to hear that. I was not at the last discussion of this particular piece, but I will say it does give me some pause. I think I do notice 2 pieces that I hear reflected in the conversation, but not in the document. One is, as written, it is not clear to me that we're speaking about adding a member. So I think it needs to say may appoint 1 additional member, or actually maybe is not the place to add the additional, but somewhere in there it needs to be better clarified that we're talking about increasing the membership of the commission. The other piece is that when it also says that each political party recognized by the State Board of Elections may appoint, and I would argue that it ought to be and I am not the expert on party structure, but it should be the local body, not the state body of the political party. I recognize that smaller parties may not have local chapters. And again, I'm probably using the wrong language because I'm not well versed in party structure, but those are two edits that I think I heard said verbally, but not actually reflected in the recommendations that's in front of us. So that would just help me clarify that what's on the page matches what the conversation we've been having.
Andy, you're on mute.
So first thing is, I will absolutely clarify that this is additive and that it is in addition to the existing allocations. I also 100% agree that we need to take on the question of representation more broadly and think about how this commission is composed. And I wish somebody would have done that. This proposal came in November and has been discussed in committee several times. And as Commissioner Lee pointed out, we were agreed to recommend it with a quorum at the last meeting. So I'm more than happy to add the points that are being made to clarify that this is additive, and to clarify that we also think that there are other representation questions on the Charter Commission that absolutely need to be tackled while we're tackling this one. I don't want to give up on this one, which I introduced, was deliberated and voted on, because other people did not also make suggestions about geographic representation, racial, ethnic, linguistic, age representation. All those things are things we should think about. And I wish that submitting this amendment had generated conversations earlier on that allowed us to have a broad increased representation on the Charter Commission amendment. And I will modify the recommendation to reflect that. But I don't, A, want to relitigate this, and B, I don't want to back down from a thing that has been introduced, deliberated in committee, and voted on by this commission.
Thank you, Andy. So I know that there may be disagreement to what is said in the report, but unless anyone thinks that there is a difference between what was voted on last meeting and approved by a majority of a quorum of the commission and what is stated in the report, then I think we should move to the next item. And Reverend Little, I see your were typo in the chat, so I'll flag that one as well. And this is a good point to remind everyone, if you do find typos, nits, commas, grammatical corrections, please feel free to email those to me. I will share them with Andy and the other drafters and editors, and we'll make sure that we get those all put in correctly. All right, the next item is the Charter Commission timing, another one that generated a lot of debate last meeting. And the proposal that was voted on last meeting and was approved by a majority of the commissioners present there at the meeting was to recommend that the Charter Review Commission be appointed by May 1st in every year that precedes a presidential election. So this would increase the number of times the Charter Review Commission is appointed, rather than being every 10 years. It would be every 4 years if my presidential election memory is correct. Andy, am I missing anything? Oh, I should point out there's a great section in here on why the status quo of infrequent charter review is inadequate. Emily went through and listed the years in which there was a charter report, and I'm noticing we need to update that to 5 instead of 4. And she pulled in again this idea that we didn't get going on time. We were supposed to be 2021. We were 2023. We didn't have adequate time. So we don't have adequate time in the length of the commission, and then only 10 years. That's another big, giant hurdle to get over. So are there any comments on this section? Any questions of whether this matches what was voted on last meeting? All right, I'm not hearing any there. And then from there, we move
I think you
into,
guys did a good job on summarizing our discussion.
thank you. Joshua, I see your hand.
Yeah, I guess the question would be, and this is overall a concern, not just with this in particular, but looking at like accountability, do we need to put some sort of measures in there to say that if not convened, what happens or what should happen?
I don't know that you can put a stick like that in a charter.
Just to give a little background on what Commissioner Harris is saying, there is a stick like that for the boards and commissions of the city. If the mayor doesn't act to appoint members after a certain period of time, then that body can forward nominations to the city council. Is that what you're basically referencing, some kind of function like that, Josh, or were you talking about something different?
Well, either that, something to where the Charter Review Commission can be convened by someone outside of just the mayor, and or what it looks like, because clearly the city's legal representation is not going to find themselves in non-legal compliance, even when they are. And so just being aware of that and the history of that, in order to be fair to the citizens of Baltimore, some sort of stipulation. Maybe it is a clause like page 141 that gives boards and commissions the ability to say that if not convened within 120 days, the city council can convene the commission or something of that sort.
Joshua, would you want to offer a motion to add that to this section?
Yeah, I guess so. I'm happy to put forward. I think that the language that's currently in there on page 141 of the charter that says for boards and commissions, that speaks to specifically a vacancy. But I would offer the amendment that we add similar language to that, with that 120-day requirement. It says that if the Charter Review Commission is not convened within 120 days of, what's the date in there currently, that the council has the ability to begin to convene the Charter Review Commission. Which
Okay, is that your motion, Josh? Or do you want to?
Before I make that motion, I guess this also comes back to the question of whether or not the Charter Review Commission should be standing versus ever so often. But I'll make the motion. So I'll make the motion, yes, that we add that amendment to it, and then we can open for discussion. So I'd like to motion that we add similar language to page 141 in the charter. This says that if the Charter Review Commission is not convened within 120 days, that the council, city council, has the ability to convene it.
Okay, so Commissioner Harris has moved that if the Charter Review Commission is not convened by the mayor within a 120-day period from the time stipulated in the charter, that the city council has the opportunity or the right to convene the Charter Review Commission. Is there a second for this motion?
Second that.
Okay. This motion has been properly moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Is there any unreadiness, questions, comments?
Reverend Little, this is Ben Guthorn. May I just make a point of information on
Please.
as currently drafted or created in the charter, because the Charter Review Commission is not seated within the executive, and more so because it's not subject to the requirements of Article 4, Section 6, which are the mayoral appointee requirements, which would require councilmatic approval. There's no real one individual or one body that currently is responsible for the bringing together of this group. And I think, and just if you'll entertain my editorializing, I think that is one of the things that led to the lack of timeliness of gathering this body. It allowed politics to come into play to one degree or another, and that's perhaps why this group wasn't gathered. And so it may be, in addition to providing a stick, be important to also identify which specific office or individual is responsible for bringing the body together. I just don't want to miss the point that currently it is not specific.
I appreciate that, Ben. I know that in all of our advocacy to get this commission jump-started, what we got back consistently from the council president and the comptroller was that the mayor was the one who had to convene. And when we raised the issue with the mayor, he kept telling us that he was. Now, I don't know if that perspective came as kind of out of a default reality where the mayor is the head of the government, and therefore, you know, if the responsibility isn't specifically assigned, then it falls to him or her, whoever the mayor is. But I appreciate what you have offered. Do you have a recommendation to this commission for how we can address that?
Well, I think that in this space, to your point, where logic, as you have pointed out, would certainly identify the mayor as the office to convene such a body. I think without an explicit statement, I think individuals are provided the space to make excuses. And again, that's a little bit of editorializing, but I hope you'll permit that. And so it would be my recommendation that the body identify either, it need not necessarily be an elected official. It can be, hypothetically speaking, the inspector general or somebody else that is responsible for bringing a group together to start this process. And the members on the commission may still very well be chosen and appointed by various elected officials to ensure that important constituencies are represented within the city, as was discussed on the previous item. But my recommendation would be limited to identify a single individual, a single office, and then the stick would be able to then say, if this person fails to do that, then this next person would be able to step up and take on that responsibility individually.
Well, I certainly think that's, you've raised some important points, and I will just editorialize and say it would much more likely be the Office of Legislative Reference than it would be the Office of the Inspector General. But we do have a motion on the floor, and so I defer to the maker and the seconder of the motion to determine whether or not you want to adjust your motion or amend your motion, or you want to proceed with the motion that's on the floor.
And Benjamin does have his hand up, so I wonder if he has a suggestion.
I was just going to make the point that Ben Guthorn made about I think that a individual within the mayor's cabinet or something like that may be helpful, but I really don't have anything to expand beyond that.
Okay, thank you. So, Joshua and John, What is your pleasure? Do you want to identify the mayor, or do you want to identify the Office of Legislative Reference or the council president, or do you want to identify one of the parties recognized by the State Board of Election?
To keep the parties out of government.
I think for some sort of balance of power would be appropriate to give the authority to the council president.
I agree.
And so I'd accept an amendment to give the convening authority. It's established that it is under the mayor's office, I believe, the executive branch. And if not done within 120 days, that the council president can convene the Charter Review Commission.
Acceptable to me.
Okay. You have heard the
We defer to the mayor too much, so we got to get some other bodies that can keep things moving.
you've
So,
heard
I just-
the amended motion. Is there further discussion on this motion? Others
Can I
who
just-
want to?
Can I just clarify what the motion is? So is the motion to give primary convening power to the mayor and then secondary convening power to the president of the city council?
That's what I interpret.
Yes.
Okay.
And that secondary power for the council president will be kicked in if not convened within 120 days of the
Of May 1st.
May 1st in that presidential year.
Why 120? Why not 30?
It's just what I just picked that number because that's the same number that's in for boards and commissions.
Those are standing boards and commissions. So like we would get in a place if it was 120 days after May 30 or after the deadline, we'd be back in a place like we were this time where we lost a big chunk of time for it. I think you're right about the stick and about the mechanism. I just think on a commission that only has a year to meet once every 4 years or once every 10 years, that 120 days is too
Right.
long.
Pick a number, Andy. I'm
30.
I do 60.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to recognize Andy, hoping that you've heard John's input. Andy, would you like to offer a friendly amendment?
60 is fine. I mean, I prefer 30, but 60 is fine if that's.
It's your option to make the amendment that you want to offer.
You think
I'm not
about the
trying-
calendar, they're in the budget cycle in May. You know, I mean, it's tough.
All the more reason to do it earlier.
Well, I would do it a year earlier, but as soon as the numbers are available.
I'm good
Okay.
with 60 if that gets consensus. I'm good with 60.
Okay, Commissioners Willis and Harris, do you accept this friendly amendment, 60 days?
I do.
Commissioner Harris?
I accept the amendment from the amendment of 60 days.
Okay. All right, so the motion is amended to 60 days. Is there other unreadiness, other discussion, questions, or debate? Seeing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And those who are opposed to the motion have the same privilege. Okay, seeing no opposition, the motion carries. Julianne, is there more that you want to discuss before we vote on the final report?
No, the rest of the report is the appendixes that that mainly Andy put together. Thank you, Andy. With some solid formatting, editing by others. I think the appendixes really just do a great job of pulling in the extra information so that if you want to see like from different sections of the report, if you want more information, you can go to the appendix. But by having it there, it keeps the content of the report more easily readable. So no, Reverend, back over to you for a question. Would you like me to make a motion?
Well, before we do that, I do want to extend the privilege. I respect all of the work that the commission did last week and all of the work or the last meeting and all of the work that the drafters did. But I do want to give one more opportunity if there are additional recommendations, not the recommendations that we've already approved, but if there are additional recommendations, now is your time to make the case. Are there any commissioners who have additional recommendations for this report?
And because this is Commissioner Willis, whatever happened to the idea for a redistricting commission, and whatever happened to the idea of the revising the board of estimates?
My answer to that question.
Purview, or is that city council already started acting on that, or what?
My answer to that question is that we were limited by time from taking up all of the important issues, but other commissioners are welcome to chime in. It's just my take, John, that
well, that's fine.
That's an important question, but I don't know that we have the time tonight to fully come up with a recommendation. And if we want to take more time, we can.
I understand that, but there are those kind of structural issues that Comptroller Henry raised. And if they haven't moved, it seems to me that we ought to at least mention that there are remaining issues.
I agree with you 100% that we should take some time to identify what other issues we think need attention sooner rather than later. I think the whole question about the Board of Estimates is an important question. It speaks to the heart of how we practice democracy in Baltimore. Right now, the Board of Estimates is more or less a sham rubber stamp body. And we really should do something about it. I don't know that.
I didn't know whether Terrell, anything came out of your committee, or whether it was just kind of like it's too complex and too fraught. But I think it needs to be identified for the public. You know, we spent.
I don't recall specifically. Let me take a look. And if it did, it would have been something that we addressed in that came from the previous cycle's recommendations.
Well, the comptroller documents out on.
Yeah, the comptroller made some recommendations as well. As Commissioner Smith reviews his notes, are there others who want to respond to what Commissioner Willis has said?
Andy's got a comment. It looks like, I don't know.
And so does Ernest. Ernest is before me.
Yes, thank you. My suggestion, and if people are amenable, I am willing to make a motion for this, would be to amend the introduction, which already talks about how we have had little time to do the work that is necessary. The introduction could be amended to add some kind of language saying that various proposals have been brought before the commission by the comptroller, by various city council members, and that, quite frankly, this commission did not have the time to give those subjects their due.
I'm happy with that as long as you mention the independent redistricting commission.
Yes, yes. So my proposal would be
the structural issues that the comptroller raised. I mean,
yes.
I think that they should be buried. He made those recommendations to us, and we should.
Yes, I think that my proposal is not to simply just say that proposals were given to us, but actually to review the record. I can do this, and then specifically say we had these proposals brought to us. We did not have the time to consider them and give them their due, and that will be our statement on the matter in the introduction.
Okay, so Commissioner Terrell Boston Smith, jump in when you're ready. Another thing that I want us to consider: what do commissioners think about placing those recommendations that came from elected officials, or perhaps any recommendations that we got, into our appendix as part of our official record of our proceeding.
That's what I was going to suggest, is that we do what Ernest was talking about in the introduction, and then we have an appendix C that lists all of the things that were brought to us by the council president, by the comptroller, and by the council people who presented to us. And we list each of those things in an appendix, and address and allude to it in the introduction, and catalog it in an appendix C.
I would be, it's Terrell, I would be in favor of that. And I think Josh has his hand up, but I don't recall as a committee we necessarily specifically talked about the, or went into detail, I would say, on the Board of Estimates. So, and I also, my only other personal caution is that that's a unique challenge politically and among other things.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Harris.
Yeah, I wanted to, well, there's a few things. I think I agree with both adding to the appendices, the proposal we received, but I also think it's particularly important to either in that letter that I mentioned or suggested earlier, or reshaping the introduction to be a letter from the chairs to specifically mention, I think, what we would consider priority recommendations that we didn't have time to thoroughly flush out, like the Board of Estimates. With that, I'm not sure if it's appropriate for me to take a moment of selfishness and also asking to be included in that, as I don't know that it's appropriate to make the motion for an additional recommendation here. Maybe it is, we can talk about it. But one of my struggles with the Police Accountability Board has been the inherent conflict of interest with the structure for civilian oversight and law enforcement to have the same legal representation that represents the Baltimore Police Department. And so the recommendation that we made in our report would be the establishment of an independent office of police oversight, which would be a separate nonprofit entity. We're working on legislation to give to the council now currently. I think it would be helpful if that recommendation were also either in the introduction and or a letter from the chairs, if not an overall recommendation from this body.
I think there are a couple of points there, Josh, actually. One of the things that I think that we need to at least address is that the charter ought to be spelling out ways to deconflict our government. And there are a lot of conflicts of interest that occur when the law department is asked to represent different aspects of city government. And one way to adjust this is to have in the charter, or just to make a recommendation to the council, that for independent agencies should always be entitled to have independent counsel. Because it's hard for an Office of Equity and Civil Rights to pursue justice if they're being represented by the same law department that is defending the city's unjust actions. So that's a lot for us to try to unpack and decode and then come up with a recommendation now, Josh. But yeah, I do think it's appropriate to include as an issue that deserves consideration. So if everyone is okay, we'd like to have the opportunity, I think, to include some of these outstanding issues in the executive summary or the introduction, or perhaps even the cover letter. Are there other hands, other people who want to weigh in on these issues?
Yeah. Sorry, Julian.
Oh, go ahead, Emily. I was just going to address redistricting.
I just wanted to say overall, I think, these are good ideas and deserving of discussion. I just think, given the limited scope of this meeting, I'm not sure it's appropriate to include some things that weren't voted on or discussed in the report. Other people might disagree.
Well,
I don't know
we're the
how
determiners of the
I
scope
feel.
of this meeting. So I think you should make your point, and other commissioners may agree with you, and we'll limit the scope. But what happens in this meeting is up to us.
Okay.
No, Emily, I'm not trying to shut you down. I want you to make your point because other people might agree with you.
I just think, we've all talked about how little time we had in general on this commission, and some of these ideas are obviously very worthwhile. I just, given our very shortened time frame to get the draft together, Andy himself has done a lot of work on this. I don't know if we have time to add in other ideas that weren't even discussed and then present them to a council for ideas that aren't fully fleshed out. Other people might have different ideas. I just think our time might be better well spent on ideas that were voted on already and that we can decide about exactly how we want to present them.
Okay. So, are you suggesting that we shouldn't raise other issues that need to be considered, or are you saying that we shouldn't make additional recommendations?
Both.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Are there other contributions to this discussion?
Reverend, we did bring up the Legislative and Oversight Committee proposed on redistricting to support the legislation that's already been put forward by Councilman Dorsey. At the meeting, though, when we addressed this, we didn't have a quorum to vote on it. So that is why it is not in the report. It was presented by the committee, but it was not voted on due to a lack of quorum.
Okay.
Thanks for
Others?
So I think it's me next, then Ben, then Josh. I think that we should put an appendix that lists all of the proposals that were brought by elected officials who came to this commission and any of the proposals that we considered but that did not vote on. I really think that the point that Josh and you were raising, Reverend Little, are important, but I don't think they go in this document because we haven't had the time to discuss them like we need to. I do think that they go in a follow-up series of things that we talk about collectively or individually about what we would have done if we actually had the time. But I think it would be hard pressed for us to take ideas that we're talking about for the first time in a deliberative fashion tonight and put recommendations around them or even raise them in the report. And I think we should draw a bright line at things that were proposed or brought to us by elected officials. And then I think all of us should collectively engage in public discussion about the things that the short time frame prevented us from raising that are important and put pressure on the council and future commissions to take those up.
Okay. Are there other contributions to this conversation?
I think Andy's right that I would draw a bright line around the recommendations that the electeds brought to us, but also that the subcommittees of this commission brought forward, as Julian gave us one example. But that I feel like it would be easy for a member of the public to assume that if we're adding things that weren't ever even discussed in committee or didn't rise to needing a vote, that's a recommendation when it's not. We're looking at a very limited number of recommendations. And I think we have to be really clear in the report about what is a recommendation versus what is. Here is a list of issues that we did not get a chance to really give the diligence that they were due. And we encourage the council and the next commission to take them up in whatever fashion, but we did not have the time.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Orr. Are there additional contributions to this discussion?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I totally agree with leaving the recommendations with the report to those things that were voted on. But I want to come back to the purpose of my recommendation at the beginning for having an executive summary or letter from the chairs as leadership was to provide the opportunity to share insight and to put things out there and documented in the sphere that we're not able to be gotten to by this body, but are worth considering and for the council and others to know. So that it's also on the record as an official part of the report, but not as an official recommendation, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Are there others who'd like to make comment or ask questions?
I would like to make a motion.
Okay, hold on one second, Andy. I think it's important for us to offer a set of recommendations. I think it's important for us to discuss why we have offered the recommendations that we've offered and why we haven't made other recommendations. I also think that it is important for us to leave a trail and offer a trail for future consumers of our report and offer direction and guidance to the council on other issues that need to be addressed. So I'm just offering my 2 cents on this discussion. And now that I have done that, Andy, I'm happy to entertain a motion from you or from any other member of the commission.
I make a motion that we include an introduction that alludes to things that were presented to us by electeds, and we include an appendix that includes proposals that were brought to us by electeds and elevated in subcommittees but not voted on, and that those be the scope of things that are not our recommendations that be included.
Okay, I hope you're able to repeat that. Commissioners, you have heard You've heard the motion from Commissioner Ellis. I did hear a second. Can you identify who made that second?
That was Commissioner Harris.
Okay, Commissioner Harris. So moved by Commissioner Ellis, seconded by Commissioner Harris. Is there unreadiness on the motion? Are there questions or comments or arguments in favor or against the motion? If you have something you want to say, now is the time to step up and say it. Okay, hearing no unreadiness, all who are in favor of the motion say aye.
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 And all who are opposed to the motion have the same privilege. Okay, the motion carries without objection or abstention. Let the record reflect that. Okay, congratulations to everyone. We have accomplished the vast majority of what we were tasked with accomplishing under some very difficult circumstances. Please, if you haven't had a chance to actually read this entire report, please do read the report and forward any corrections, technical corrections, to Commissioner Montes de Oca, and that she will be able to share those with the drafters. And we should also take some time to, once we get a final document, send it to all of the commissioners, not for us to vote on again, but so that everybody has an opportunity to review the document. If there's anything glaring that people object to or feel like is not a representation of what we agreed to, you'd have an opportunity to state that. So, Ben, as we work to meet our timeline, help keep us honest so that we can do that and make sure that every commissioner, even if they don't agree with everything on the report, feels like the report accurately represents what we agreed to do today.
I'm happy to do that. I will say that the limitation of that will be that my efforts will be the same as trying to get people to attend our meetings, which is I can distribute and create some strong words, but I can't necessarily compel responses. So if you'll allow me that, I will most certainly make every effort to make sure that everybody feels heard.
If you don't have 100% participation, then we're going to hold you very much accountable.
I know that. You feel free to dock it to my salary.
And let me thank you for your patience.
Chairman, I want to make sure, was the motion on the floor was not to approve the whole thing, was it? I thought it was just the format that Andy had proposed. Because, Andy, what was...
Andy?
Andy?
You want to clarify that, Andy? Did I miss something?
Well, Julianne, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say there was no motion yet on the entire report. Andy's motion was just on adding the appendix with the proposals that were not voted on.
Agree with that. I just want to make sure what I did, in case I misunderstood.
Thank you. I misheard the motion. I thought Andy was saying that we should approve all the recommendations and add an appendix. So thank you for pointing that out, Commissioner Willis.
I didn't think we were ready yet to...
Okay.
But I will make a motion to approve the report. How do I want to phrase this? To approve as drafted the substance of the report as it reflects the proposals voted on by the commission.
As drafted and amended at this meeting.
Yes.
Okay. We've heard the motion from our co-chair. Is there a second from Commissioner? Okay. Is that from Commissioner Boston?
That was me, Commissioner Lay.
Okay. Commissioner Lay. Okay. Thank you. Are there any unreadiness on this motion? Is there any unreadiness on this motion? Okay. All in favor of accepting the meaning of this report as drafted and amended, say aye.
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 All those who are opposed have the same privilege?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay. Okay. Is that 2 nays or 1 nay?
One's for me. I don't know.
Yeah. Hey, this is Matt Stegman. Sorry, I'm late. Nay vote.
Okay. So let's do a roll call on this, if you would. Ben, would you call the roll?
Happy to. I'm going to go with as names appear on the WebEx, so I apologize if they're not in alpha order. Ellis.
Yay.
Orr.
Yay.
Minor Terrell.
Yay.
Levy.
Yay.
Lay.
Aye.
Willis.
No.
Harris.
Yay.
Montes de Oca.
Aye.
Stegman.
Nay.
Faulkner.
Yay.
Little.
I'll abstain, given that I'm chairing the meeting.
Terrell. Or Boston
Nay.
Terrell, excuse me.
Nay.
Just to confirm, that was a no vote.
Yep.
Did I not call any names that are present here at the meeting? If you'll give me one moment. That is 8 in the affirmative, with 3 noes, with 1 abstention. Motion carries.
Right. Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect that I'm only abstaining because I'm serving as chair, and in substance, I support this report. Okay, so we want to thank all the commissioners for their work and for the positions that they've taken on this. Are there other matters that should come before us before we adjourn?
I have a question. So you're going to put a final document together and add some more information. Will we see that before it's transmitted to the council?
Absolutely. The document should be circulated to all of us to make sure that everyone feels confident that what is going to be sent to the mayor and council represents what we agree to. There won't be an opportunity to vote, but everyone will have the opportunity to speak up if they feel like there is a misrepresentation. And if there is a misrepresentation, then we will cross that bridge. Or if there are people who feel like there are misrepresentations, then we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I do want to just offer one thing, if you will allow me. Earlier in our discussion, I think Andy used the term "we" and said that we voted. And John, you objected to that language, and I understand why you objected.
He corrected appropriately,
But we, as a commission, have decided to approve this report, and we hope that now that we have voted, all of us will agree that we voted to approve this report. Now, if folks like, it's well within your right to offer a minority consideration or a minority report, but I would hope that in the spirit of democracy, that we would move forward in agreement with the report that has been approved.
No, since this is a body, a representative body, and a democratic body, that's fine. You can accept the results of, but you don't have to agree with all the contents, whether that's an election or it's a piece of bill, a legislation, whatever. And so I suggest that I would wait. I'm not going to get into that, but I'm not sure all of our recommendations are going to be accepted. So it's up to the council. They've got the final say. So I understand that.
Okay. Are there other commissioners?
I'm not gonna go around and say Andy's right. I'm not gonna...
Other commissioners that would like to have a final word.
Yes, I think that one, I think that it's important. Thank you all for your work on this and for getting through this with a short amount of time and very nuanced, details to go through. And I think it's important, one, in the spirit of democracy, transparency, as well as what we discussed on what happens with some of the ballot initiatives, for us to make sure that there's public awareness about what we just were able to do and accomplish in this report. And so it will be my recommendation that once the report is final, that we reconvene, or we can do it via email, to discuss public release of our report and the recommendations. I think it's critical and part of our responsibility as commissioners to make sure that this report doesn't just go and sit in a corner somewhere to collect dust, but that we do some sort of public launch and make sure that the press and the public are informed of the report and know where to find it and how to access it, to see what our recommendations and highlight what those key recommendations were. Maybe that's in the form of a press conference. Maybe that's in the form of our co-chairs doing a series of interviews, but something of the sort. I think we should discuss that once the report is in its final stages.
Okay. Ben, what does the law say, or what do the guidelines say about our ability to convene ourselves after a certain period of time? Do we have time, or how do you see that? What's your thinking? Do we need to be concerned about the time, or do we have the space to have another meeting since we've already fulfilled our job of submitting this report to the mayor and council?
So I would say after the submission of the report, which would occur on or before the 31st of May, which is next Friday, the commission itself is officially disbanded thereafter upon that submission. The gathering of the group, again, for common action before that period would constitute a triggering of the Open Meetings Act. So it would need to have public notification. It would need to be accessible to the public to view. So those are the general guidelines. If there are more specific questions about what specifically could be done in terms of ideas about, say, publication or notification, I'm not certain that raises to the level. It just depends on how many people get together. So that is my general advice, though obviously not counsel to the group.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the guidance. Other commissioners who would like to have a say?
Can I ask a question, a logistical and technical question about that, Ben?
Sure.
Absolutely.
Do we have, like, I was trying to figure this out the other day, like, is there a presentation to the council as commission that occurs after a report is submitted, that is really when the commission dissolves, or does the commission dissolve at the date of delivery of the paper?
Let me double check the charter if you'll give me a moment. I will say that Aaron DeGraffenreich, who is counsel to the city council, has said that they will work with the council president's office and the council to find an appropriate time for the formal presentation of the report before the council, be it a gathering of a specific committee or the council as a whole. The specifics were not laid out in the conversation that I was a part of. So if you'll just give me one moment, please.
Okay. As Ben checks his notes, are there other commissioners who'd like to have a final word?
I looked up this issue today, and I'm just putting in the chat what the appointment letter says. And so the question is for Ben and the city council is, when is the written report delivered? How is it delivered? Do we take it to the council and, does that still give us time to do something or not do something? But it's apparent that we don't have these meetings anymore once it's delivered to the council.
Certainly. So within the charter, Article 11, it states in Section 2, which discusses the term of the commission, that once established, that the commission uses the word shall submit its work to the mayor and city council not later than May 31st in the year following its establishment. Let's recognize the difficulty of that given how this body came together and the timeliness of that. But May 31st is the date stated within the charter. It then states within Section 2, subsection B, in dissolution, that upon completion and submission of its work to the mayor and city council, the commission shall be deemed dissolved. And then further, within Section 4, it states that, which describes the duties of the commission, that, we already did this. Prior to delivering of the report to the mayor and city council, shall hold at least one public hearing to receive public testimony. That was done. And then in Section 5, report to the mayor and city council, quote, within subsection A, the commission shall deliver a written report of its findings and recommendations to the mayor and city council. And then in subsection B of Section 5, it states that the city council shall hold a public hearing at which the commission shall present its report and recommendations. And then again, it restates that in section 6, the topic of dissolution. On completing the activities required above in section 5, the commission shall be deemed dissolved and its work completed. I'd say that the way that I read section 5, that it's entirely possible that the public hearing would occur after May 31st, and only upon the execution of that public hearing held by the city council and the presentation of that report for the council that is open to the public, that the work and the body itself would be done and dissolved.
Right. I agree with that interpretation. So that's what we're going to run with. Our work will not be completed until such time as the city council convenes a hearing and we present the report at that hearing. So we do have some wiggle room to have some media outreach, and we'll work with Ben. We'll work with you to figure out what kind of work sessions we need to have in order to discuss that, and then go from there.
I'll offer myself as a resource in that work as well.
We appreciate that, and it's welcomed. Are there other commissioners who would like to have a final say for this meeting? Well, I'm really, really grateful for all of the contributions that everyone made. I appreciate the minority opinions and the courage that it took to offer those minority opinions, sharing our ideas and working through these issues has helped us to make, I think, a reasonable report. And I have found this exercise to be well worth my time and energy, and I hope that you all have as well. If there are no further comments, then we will call this meeting adjourned. Any further comments?
See you
Okay.
around.
Go ahead, please, Commissioner Willis.
No, I just said see you around town. All of you.
Okay.
Good workers,
Oh,
working good work on the draft. Thank you, and look forward as these issues remain afloat.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's call this meeting adjourned at 8:13. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.